Welcome to my channel. My name is Josh Christian, and today I'm interviewing a special guest who just so happens to be my wife and an expert in the fields of automation and programming. I'm going to let her introduce herself here in a second, so let's get started. So first off, introduce yourself to my audience and let them know a little bit about yourself.
My name's Anne, and I'm Joshua's wife. My family moved to New York when I was 17, and I attended college in Rochester for engineering. Today, I'm working as a controls engineer full-time.
So what are some of the types of things that you actually do as a controls engineer? Because I know that when most people hear the term controls, they think of Homer Simpson just at a console at the nuclear plant.
So actually, I would be the person programming the machinery that Homer Simpson is working on and operating, and I would be sometimes training the operator, Homer Simpson, to use that machinery. Often I'll be programming a machine called a PLC to control a variety of other devices like conveyor belts, robots, screwdrivers, drives, cameras, and they're all working together with the goal to produce a product or to monitor a process. I'll also design a user interface for an operator to interact with the system, and at other times I'm programming logic to analyze data or to give reports to managers that want to see that data. So there's a variety of things that I do in my job.
So what led you into automation as a career to begin with?
I've always been interested in how things work and how things are made. So when I went to college, I decided to study engineering and then figure out the details of exactly which niche I wanted to fit myself into. When I was in college, one of my professors introduced me to controls and automation. He shared some books with me and some resources. So I began to teach myself through these books, and I found some courses online as well, which taught me the basics of the programming that I needed to know. And then through using AutoCAD and writing my own programs with some free software, I was able to get my first entry-level job.
So it's probably pretty good you had a professor then who guided you in the right path.
Yeah, if it weren't for him, I probably would have never heard of controls and automation because it's not taught at most colleges.
Yeah, I had never even heard of it before I had met you, to be honest. So what are some of the companies that you've worked for specifically in the field of automation?
Up in New York, I did work for GW Lisk, GM, Bosch & Lomb. In Texas, I've done work for Dannon, Lockheed Martin, JCPenney, Bimbo Bakeries, and Tesla. And lately, I've been doing work for Smithfield Foods as well.
So what was it like working at Tesla?
It was very different from any facility I've ever been to, especially for an automotive manufacturer. It was clean, it was new, all of the machines were of the highest quality.
Well, it's brand new, basically.
Yeah, the Gigafactory was being built literally as I was there. There were many robots everywhere as well, putting cars together, a lot of things happening all at once, huge welders above my head spraying sparks everywhere within their enclosures. And it was a very energetic place as well. There was always something new happening, production managers coming around to see how things were going, and the machines I got to work on were really interesting.
And that's the Giga Texas factory in Austin that they just recently built and finished.
Mm-hmm. So
do you ever actually build the robots as a controls engineer, or are you just setting them up and programming them?
I myself actually don't build the robots. There are specialty companies that do that, most of which are in Japan or China, like Fanuc, Mitsubishi, and Hitachi robots, yeah. And there are certainly controls programmers who work on those robots and program them. They would just be working for those companies that manufacture robots.
So what's the difference between the robot and the interconnected machine that you talked about earlier?
An interconnected machine will take many devices and integrate them all together. So you'll have conveyor belts moving product underneath robots. Robots are mounted on the side, usually doing work with different hand parts or suction cups on that product. They might even be welding on the product, like at Tesla with the cars. And then the conveyor belt will take that product to the next step in the assembly line. That could be a filler, it could be a screwdriver, a camera. So the difference is we were putting together those machines and controlling all the different parts, making them all work together, telling each part when it needed to fire in the sequence. Versus robot manufacturers just make the robot.
So it's like one articulating arm. You know, they have like the 5-axis arms and things like that. It's like just one of those pieces.
Yeah, a robot typically consists of an arm, and it could have 2, 3, 4, even 6 axes, and they come in many different sizes. There's some that are real cute and small like this, and there's some that are as big as like 2 cars.
So what software, or like more specifically, what programming languages would people actually need to control all these machines and be a controls engineer?
The primary programming languages used in controls would be ladder logic, structured text, function block, sometimes LabVIEW, and sometimes Python for scripting. Other languages that I have learned independently would be C#, C, and Python. And those have helped me just understand logic and programming in general better, but I haven't used them very often in controls work.
What about MATLAB? I always hear about MATLAB being used for like science and education and things like that. Does that ever get any use in the automation industry?
I learned MATLAB in school, and it was used as a tool to teach us basic programming and how to do math with logic using a computer. But I've never actually used it in the field and in my job.
So it's kind of like Haskell, where it's mostly used for education.
I think it's mostly used for education, yeah.
So do you see automation in manufacturing specifically as a growing field or somewhat stagnant like the rest of technology? Because I know a lot of technology fields have kind of hit a plateau lately. In fact, a lot of technology sectors are on the downtrend. So what's the outlook for automation in manufacturing?
Automation and controls has seen incredible growth. We can't even keep up with it. Most companies that I've worked for or seen have a backlog of work, and they just are trying to catch up.
So what kinds of different industries use automation and controls for their different daily operations?
It's everywhere you look. It's in automotive for our cars, food and beverage, in your grocery stores, retail distribution, online shopping, even transportation when you take a bus anywhere or a train.
So cities basically have it too. Like I wouldn't really think much about municipals, but like city districts would have to have some sort of distribution system for water and for electricity and all that, right?
Yeah, water purification and distribution. I actually just watched a video recently on California Water and the way their PLCs are controlling all their water lines. You also see it in cruise lines and hospitality. For all of their laundry and garbage, they use PLCs and machines to manage it.
Yeah, I've watched some of those videos. I think there's a TV show or like a short documentary film on Amazon right now called The Secret Life of a Cruise Ship. And I noticed when I was watching it behind the scenes that there was all these control panels all over the ship, especially in the lower parts. They were using them for the engine room and for, like you said, laundry and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's amazing how many controls are on a cruise ship. And you can actually make a whole career being a controls engineer on a cruise ship and just traveling around and working on their machines.
That seems like it would actually be a pretty fun job.
Yeah, if you're young and love to travel, it's one of the best things to do.
That'd be the only caveat, though, that you basically have to be away from your family all the time, so it'd probably be better for somebody that's a single person or something along the lines of that.
Right. Not the best fit for me, but for many people, it would be a great fit to gain experience.
Yeah, for sure. So in a world where large companies are laying people off really en masse right now, especially companies that are involved in manufacturing because they're automating things that traditionally people did, do you ever feel guilty about coming in and building these machines that you know are ultimately going to replace people?
Yeah, sometimes I do feel guilty because some of these are people who can't get another job or don't have the opportunity to go back to school and reskill in order to start a different career. But on the whole, I feel like it's actually more beneficial for people because these positions are extremely repetitive, boring, and mind-numbing. And they often cause workplace injuries from doing repetitive movement all the time. It can cause a lot of muscle strain and...
Carpal tunnel probably, too.
Carpal tunnel.
Yeah, I had a friend who worked at a manufacturing plant where he was doing one really, really specific task. He was just picking one thing up and setting it down like this on a conveyor belt as it would go, and it like destroyed his wrists after a year, maybe 2 years of doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, one project, we trained a robot how to take little screws and place them in clips in a tree. And a person used to do that. A person used to take minuscule little screws and place them in these little clips, like bobby pin clips, in a tall tree. And that's a horrible job. I couldn't imagine. It would drive me crazy.
Did you talk to the person that actually did the job?
No. But when I was working on the machine, I actually had to do it myself, placing the screws in the tree, and it drove me crazy.
Yeah, it would really hurt your wrists after a while, for sure.
Yeah.
So what kind of person would excel in controls and really enjoy it as a career path?
I think someone who is innovative, creative, and really enjoys learning and problem solving, because you're always going to run into new and challenging problems.
So what community or environmental impact do you make as a controls engineer?
You're often working on a project or machine that is supplying people things they really need in their everyday lives, like water and energy. Often the project managers needing support with these machines have quotas and deadlines that they need to meet. And so when I go to work on a machine, there's a real urgency to get the job done and fix a problem that's happening.
Let's talk about the controls job market. Where can you find work? Because I know Dallas is sort of a hub of controls. A lot of people move to Dallas specifically for controls engineering, but is this something that you could find in most cities? Can you do it anywhere?
It's certainly best if you live in a region with a lot of manufacturing because your company will always be able to find new work. And if you were to get laid off or lose your job, you're able to find a new one pretty quickly. But in every city, like we talked about before, there is PLCs, there's automation all around us. So pretty much anywhere you live, there's going to be a need for automation and controls engineers. But like I said, there's just going to be more of it in those bigger cities and hubs.
Right, because you could just work for like city water, like we talked about earlier, or something like transportation.
Yeah, every city is basically going to have those services that require automation.
But assuming you were somebody looking for a job in this industry and willing to relocate, what would be the best cities to live in?
The biggest manufacturing hubs in the US are New York, Rochester, Detroit, Chicago, Cincinnati, San Diego, Phoenix, Ogden, Utah, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. Those are just to name a few.
Well, at least people wouldn't have to move too far then because that covers most metropolitan areas. How about the world? If I have an international viewer, for example, who's in India or in Europe somewhere, what would be the big cities for manufacturing around the world internationally?
The biggest ones I know around the world are Tokyo, Shanghai, Beijing, Dubai, Manchester, England, Mumbai in India, Johannesburg, South Africa, and Sao Paulo, Brazil.
So when you're in the field actually performing the work, what is the work environment like? Is it really dirty? Is it clean? Does it just depend on the plant? What are people like?
The work environment can really vary. Sometimes you'll be in an office where it's clean and quiet. Sometimes you'll be on the road going from plant to plant. You might be on a fabrication floor where you're building machines, or you might be inside of a plant where they're producing bread or making retail products.
So it can get really dirty sometimes too, right?
Yeah, some of the environments are really dirty, especially automotive or in plants where they're using a lot of lubricants.
But then some are clean because you mentioned Tesla earlier was like an abnormally clean plant for a car manufacturing plant.
Yeah, that one's just brand new and they've worked to keep it clean, so it's kind of a unique case.
But you have worked at really dirty plants too.
Yeah, especially pulp and paper manufacturers, they tend to be really wet and they're making paper and there's just a lot of dampness in the air.
It seems like it'd be very mildewy working in a place like that. Like I'd get really bad allergies.
Yeah, it can be. It just really depends where you're working. As for the people I've worked with, there's many different types. I've worked with highly educated project managers. Some have engineering or mechanical backgrounds. Some are programmers. Some people have more of a blue-collar background working as an electrician. So there's many different types that you'll encounter in the field.
That's good. So there's a lot of intellectual diversity. You're not just working with one type of person. Like if you were to work at Facebook, you're only working with programmers typically, or at least people that have bachelor's degrees or masters. So I kind of like that you can work with such a wide range of people from so many different backgrounds.
Yeah, I encounter people from many different backgrounds. So sometimes I have to tailor my support of them to their understanding. If they're an electrician or an operator, they might not understand complex terms. Or if they're a project manager, they might want more detail.
And I'm sure in most cases it's not quite as simple as one group is smarter than another, but they just have completely different skill sets and come from totally different walks in life.
Yeah, they're all very well-rounded and great people to work with.
Would a programmer working in mainstream technology have an easy time transitioning into automation?
I think a mainstream programmer would have a very easy time transitioning into controls and automation because they already have a very strong foundation of programming and logic, and they're already very good at problem solving.
And what would be the biggest stumbling block for somebody coming from that background? Would it be the hardware specifically?
There'd certainly be a lot to learn about hardware and electrical components needed to build control systems, and they'd want to build up their skills in AutoCAD for designing schematics. But overall, I think they'd be able to learn those things pretty quickly. One unpleasant thing they might run across is that a lot of legacy code written for PLCs is not pretty at all. It's not written by programmers, it's written by electricians who just learned how to code on the fly. And so there's spaghetti logic, it's disorganized, it doesn't always make very good sense, it's not usually commented very well. So you have to do a lot of reverse engineering sometimes and going through the code to try to understand what was this person trying to do.
Right, because a lot of these companies, instead of hiring a controls engineer, they didn't realize how important it was, so they just took another employee they had from some other subset or subfield, and they just put them on controls and told them, hey, come build this PLC or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes that's what happens. And that's actually one of the great things about the industry is that you can wear many hats. You can go from being a technician to learning how to program PLCs and becoming a controls engineer, and then even maybe becoming a project manager someday. So there's a lot of flexibility in where you can take your career.
So that leads me then into my next question, which is what type of training and education or certifications would you need to get into controls engineering, or is the only path college?
College definitely isn't the only path. In fact, a lot of colleges don't teach automation or controls, but it can definitely help to have a college background so that your employer sees that you have the follow through and that you've taken some engineering classes or mathematics. How I got into it was through taking online classes independently. I found PLC 1, PLC 2 by Paul Lin on Udemy. There's also programming courses on Codecademy that can be really helpful. And then I learned how to make schematics in AutoCAD while I was at the college by using the free student's license. So there's definitely ways to get into it independently and through self-taught methods. Additionally, a lot of experience is gained through hands-on work with the machines once you're working a job. And so you're not going to be able to prepare for a lot of that ahead of time in college. You're always going to have new problems thrown at you and new technologies that you need to learn constantly.
Yeah, it seems like a field that's just so big and so diverse. You're working on so many different kinds of machines. It'd be impossible to learn all of that just in one place or at one college or with one degree or certification or anything like that.
Yeah, and if you're a controls engineer and you're entry level or intermediate and you want to advance your career more, you can get a professional engineer's license or other certifications that will gain you trust and respect in your field.
And is that state level something you actually get from your state, or is that federal?
Yeah, a professional engineer's license would be something you apply with your state and you go through about 4 years of training to get.
And when looking for jobs in automation, specifically as a controls engineer, how does that differ in terms of the job search when you compare that to looking for jobs in traditional programming fields like C# or Python?
Well, controls and automation is growing a lot, and companies can hardly keep up. They have an aging out workforce, and the younger generation isn't learning it in college, so it's pretty hard to find workers to fill those jobs.
So what you're saying is it's basically the exact opposite of how everything else in programming is right now when you're looking for work.
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs available and there aren't many people applying to those jobs. So when you do apply, you get seen, and the interview process is a lot more open and general. They want to know that you're a good problem solver and that you have experience.
So none of that LEET code garbage or anything like that.
No, they're not going to pressure you into doing any nonsensical tests. They really just care about what matters.
So it's general knowledge mostly.
Yeah.
I like that. That's how programming used to be. So what is it like being a woman in controls? Have you noticed a lot of stigma about that?
Yeah, at the first company I worked, I was actually the first woman controls engineer that they hired. I was working around all men, but I never really felt judged because I was a woman.
Did you feel like some sense of extra pressure because you're a woman? You want to perform better to sort of compensate for perhaps people's dogma?
I probably did put that pressure on myself because I was entry level, I was new to it, and they were all experienced men around me who had been doing this for around 30 years. So I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to show them that I could do a good job.
And did you?
Yes, definitely. The second company I worked at was actually founded by a woman. And it was a fairly small company, and it was still probably half men working there, and then me and the founder. And she had built the company wanting to value women in the controls industry more, so she had put in place better benefits for women and better flexibility so that you could take time off to be with your family, which is sometimes a problem in the industry.
So you would say that automation as a whole is pretty welcoming for women. They don't need to shy away from it.
Yes, it's very welcoming to women now. Actually, when I was last looking for a job, a recruiter said that it's to my advantage that I'm a woman because a lot of companies are actively trying to hire more women. At my current company, we have people working to try and make the company more diverse and more welcoming to people of all backgrounds. Overall, it's still a very male-dominated industry. At my current company, it's about 20% women, 13% of which are working technical jobs. The women in the industry are very intelligent, very competent, and they've distinguished themselves as great workers. And overall, the industry is moving towards greater diversification.
And do you see machine learning, or more specifically what people are referring to as AI, playing a significant role in the future of automation?
That's one of the most important and exciting future technologies gaining interest in automation. It has great applications for the future in data analysis, predictive simulations, and training for operators. We actually use AI for a lot of things today, like robot sorting, pick and place, shape recognition, and data analysis.
In an industry where you're working with really big, heavy, dangerous machines, what safety risks would that pose, assuming you're integrating AI into programming these automated machines?
Well, we wouldn't let AI have full reign of the machine to program it and tell parts where to go. That would cause huge health and safety risks. It could also result in products being made incorrectly and not conforming to quality standards.
And probably machine crashes too, I would imagine.
Yes, probably. So if you gave AI control to program a machine and troubleshoot it and test it, it could make some really big mistakes. Similar to how on AI-powered search engines now, you can ask it to create art for you. It can create pretty amazing art, but even then there's sometimes mistakes and incongruencies that we notice with the human eye, but that AI doesn't have the ability to notice.
Have you made any major mistakes?
I've made a few, but I've usually been able to fix them.
So other than AI, what are some other modern advancements being introduced into controls and automation?
Digital twins is a big one. We can use a camera now to take a 3D scan of a machine, and that translates it into a CAD model in a computer. This is a digital model that can physically replicate all the processes of the machine and simulate different scenarios. Using this paired with AI, we can actually run through different scenarios and we can predict where bottlenecks might happen, where safety risks might be a problem, and how we can make the machine better. Probably a lot of people have been hearing about VR glasses and goggles, and we can actually use augmented reality and virtual reality simulations in controls to train our operators and technicians and simulate maintenance tasks so that we can perform them better. You probably also heard about the Internet of Things being integrated into your TV systems, your computers, your household devices, and businesses. So that's a big thing gaining interest in automation and controls. We're using it with connecting our machines up to networks so that we can monitor them remotely with SCADA systems. SCADA is a supervisory control system that allows you to see what's happening with the machine from your home or from an office 100 miles away. So this has allowed project managers to see what's happening on the floor and get data reports, see where they need to optimize different processes or respond to a problem more quickly.
Do you think all of this IoT integration is a bad thing potentially though? Because we have seen major hacks happen. I think only a couple years ago, a whole city's water department was shut down because a hacker hacked into their, I guess it was a controls network of some sort, and they were able to completely shut off the water and they couldn't even manually override it.
Yeah, that's a big fear for manufacturers, and it's a reason many of them have been reluctant to put their machines on networks and introduce the Internet of Things. It's increasing the need for more security personnel and cybersecurity experts because we need to close those gaps and make these systems extremely secure so that things like that can't happen. It's a big threat for major companies around the world that someone will attempt a ransomware attack, take over their system, change settings on their machines or lock them out and require them to do certain things to get back in is definitely a major growing concern for big companies and governments around the world.
Yeah, I imagine we're heading towards a world where technological terrorism is going to be more easy and accessible than ever before.
It's also a great opportunity for anyone interested in entering a career in cybersecurity. Another big one is 3D printing and additive manufacturing. So a lot of companies like Tesla at their facilities have big 3D printers where they can build prototypes from simple CAD models, and then they can put these right into production and test them. It's really speeding up development of machines and allowing companies to customize them to their needs.
And that leads me to my final question. What are some of your favorite jobs or projects that you've worked on?
Probably my favorite was when I went to work at Tesla as a contractor on one of their machines. Another company had built it, but it wasn't finished, and there were a lot of pieces that still needed code written and needed to be troubleshooted and polished. And I got to go through each section of that machine, write code for it, and test it and troubleshoot it. There were robots, conveyors, pick and place, hydraulic presses, and cameras. It was a very interesting machine. And to top it all off, once all was programmed and working correctly, I got to train the operators on how to use it, and I got to tailor the user experience and interface to meet their needs.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming onto my channel and talking about your work, Anne.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe down below for more content like this coming soon. See you on the next one.